I want to welcome everybody to the Daily Cheat Sheet, and I beg of everybody to either go to our new Rumble Daily Cheat Sheet or our YouTube, and you could look at Golan in the dark in Barcelona as he's fighting off the mosquitoes at
I
some
am. I just sprayed myself with every bit of this all over my body.
I actually see them flying around. That's the commitment he has to the show and to do the
That's
show
right.
outside his house so he does not wake up his children. But again, thank you. I got to say, one of the funniest things, though, we got a comment, a review on Apple. It was a very nice review. And it was years ago gone. This is a true story. I was looking, and I love Korean barbecue. Absolutely love it. And Ben Stein and myself used to go to, or me or I, however you want to say it, used to go to Koreatown a lot and get Korean barbecue. So I was looking, but you can never remember the names of the places because they're all in Korean and they all end with dong. I'm not kidding either, and it's actually a true story. And so I was like yelping reviews for another place, and this person had this. And I'm not knocking this person that wrote the review. I thank you very much for the review and the. But this person wrote the best dumplings I've ever had in my life. This place is amazing, and he gave it like 4 stars out of 5. And I was thinking to myself, well, what would have given it a 5 star? Like what would like what would like if it's the best dumplings you've ever had and you gave it 4 stars? So somebody wrote, I was looking for a podcast or news source to replace Steve Bannon and RAV because I had it with his anti-Israel sentiment. Right there with you. And I happened upon the Daily Cheat Sheet and I'm hooked. Thank you very much. We're hooked with you. God bless you guys. I'm here to stay. I was thinking, he gave us 4 stars, and I'm like, you left everybody and you found us and you came to us in 4 stars. Hopefully, we'll get that a bump up to 5. Thank you very much for the ratings and review. And it's
I
pretty
am.
funny.
I do have to say, I am curious what we would have to do to get that 5 stars. What is the one step beyond? Is it Cirque du Soleil? Because I will do the news on my head. I'm doing it out here with the mosquitoes.
Yeah.
Can we get an extra star, please?
Yes. And the dude couldn't be here tonight, so it's just the two of us. And go on. We do this show, and we talked during the day, and I talked to, thank God, I talked to Ben Boychuk, one of my closest friends from the Blaze, and an editor, the opinion editor at the Blaze. And I when I'm getting ready for a show or getting ready to write something, I always throw it by people because you don't want to be angry when you write. You don't want to be sad necessarily when you write. You just have to be measured in some ways and just not go crazy. And that's why we all, especially on this show, why we have to practice that. And so in a sense, we're all each other's producers, right? We're all
I like.
like,
I like that. That there's a nice symmetry to that.
no, but I believe that to be the truth. And as I brought up many times, even the great Johnny Carson had a producer. And we're living in a world of grifters without producers, of influencers without producers, of everybody that just says the first thing that comes to their mind. And instead of saying, I messed up, they double down, they triple down, they quadruple down. And here is the
That's
mess
really
we are in.
interesting, by the way. It's really interesting because you're right. The podcaster world, everyone has taken over kind of our public conversation. These are people who mainly operate on their own, in their own head, speaking with people who are employees watching, nobody that really is there to oversee or to be a guardrail against anything. Before Joe Rogan started turning into Himmler, I had a friend who wanted to get on his show.
Explain that one more time because nobody knows.
If nobody knows who Joe Rogan is, Joe Rogan's a pod. Just kidding. All right. So Joe Rogan, for a very long time, was a guy that I loved listening to. He always brought on a real diversity of opinions. And it wasn't about trying to get news. It wasn't about trying to establish a narrative. But when you listen to Rogan, it was to listen to him chat because he was a guy who was really, really good at chatting and he was a really good listener. So he would just bring stuff up, whatever popped into his head. It was stream of consciousness. The conversation was free flowing. Something would come up and it would suddenly veer. Even if he had someone who wasn't an expert in a particular topic, if alien abduction came up, it's something that Joe was interested in. He's talking about alien abduction. Bow hunting deer came up. He could be talking to a nuclear physicist. It would be half an hour on getting into an ice bath. But then suddenly, post the Douglas Murray interview, it was like that doubling down thing you're talking about happened. And every conversation suddenly seemed to be about a topic, with an expert. And he just became like any other interviewer, with a point of view he was trying to establish, with a narrative he was trying to chase. And a lot of those narratives, unfortunately, and you can kind of go through the guest list and see what I mean, seem to skew in one direction, which was anti-Jewish, anti-Israel direction. And a lot of his guests, the Dave Smiths of the world, and a lot of people who were like that, and even people who never had had an opinion before, saw that Dave Smith was getting views. And so they went on and they also said something anti-Israel, because now it's about getting clicks and likes. And so before that happened, when he was still that free flowing, jovial conversationalist that I loved so much, I was listening constantly. And I had a friend who was a stand up comedian, which is a sector that Joe really focused on promoting, and happens to be Israeli. Very funny guy, but he had a news story. This guy, Yoha Sponder, who's a brilliant comedian. It's Yohay, Sponder. If you ever get a chance, really, really recommend checking out his YouTube stuff. But he had a show that was supposed to go on in the Netherlands, and they canceled the show because he's Jewish. And my friends and I went to every venue that existed all over Amsterdam, all over the country, and nobody was willing to put him on stage because he was Jewish and because he was Israeli. And it became this major news story. There were newspaper articles being written about the most dangerous comedian, tongue in cheek in Europe. Finally, we were able to get him a venue, and the show was a massive success, and it went off without a hitch, with a lot of security. But because this is right after the pogrom had happened in the Netherlands. And so we were talking about what a great story for a comedian to go on Joe Rogan and tell this story, because comedians are who he supports, international news, a headline story. And there's no producer to talk to. There is a booker who's kind of a buddy of his who you send him the email, he forwards it to Joe. If Joe feels like it, he responds. If he doesn't, he doesn't. There's no official anything to go through. There's no infrastructure. So basically, if it's not Joe or the guy he pays to, give him information or put stuff up on the screen during the show, there's nobody to talk to. So there is no infrastructure like you're talking about. There's no gatekeeper. There's no producer. You're absolutely right. I experienced this myself.
And I'm not just referring, by the way, and it's a remarkable story. I'm not just referring to Rogan. I'm referring to, obviously, if Tucker Carlson, if had a producer, he would have said, hey, maybe don't go with the gay guy that said he, with Obama. Like, my mother listens to the show. I don't need to go into. They would have said, Tucker, probably not the best idea. And if you notice, he's had to double down, all seriousness after
Of
that.
course.
And I'm even referring to somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? Congressmen are supposed to have aides, right? They're supposed to have people working in their office saying this might not be the best thing. And again, because there's only one Trump. Good, bad, indifferent, ugly, beautiful, great. There's always one Trump, and he's allowed to say what he wants. That's it. But
Right.
what we're experiencing right now with them doubling down and tripling down and quadrupling down is a massive wave of anti-Semitism that's occurring, especially in the United States. I think it's up 85%. And
Yeah.
that's an insane number. A guy in St. Louis had the crap kicked out. I mean, just you're witnessing, and words have consequences. They do. It's why we're always careful. Us, normal people, are careful, Golan, of how we speak, because we do not want people. If we all said what we were thinking, that would be so out there of danger. And we don't do it because we have respect for the human race.
It's interesting you say this, because I think about this a lot. Is that me, as a white presenting Israeli Jewish guy? I'm a heterosexual. Like, I'm all the stuff that right now is hated in the world, and
We're
I'm
reverse
very.
intersectionality. I always joke about that. It's like I'm sober, I'm a Jew, I'm white. You know what I mean? Like, I'm all these different things. I should be like on the intersectionality scale of like hierarchy, but I'm like the lower archy. I've
It's
like
a
I'm like
lower archy.
I've hit lower archy status. But go on. Sorry.
No, but this is my point, is that whenever I say anything in the public sphere, and I do this every day with you, plus everything that I do on the other podcast, plus whatever I do on social media, plus the conversations I have in general, at any time, I could say something that's meant to be innocuous that then is taken out of context, or I'm saying something that has the potential to get me in trouble, even though I'm trying to present a point that actually is benevolent or whatever, right? I'm so careful about everything that I say, about how I parse my words. And look, I'm less careful than some because I operate in an environment where I can give my opinion, like we do on this show, and where I'm studying the facts and I'm actually learning about a lot of these topics. So I feel like there's some authority that comes with my voice, and I'm still incredibly careful. And then I look at something like the Mahmoud Khalil interview that happened recently with Ezra Klein in the New York
Explain
Times.
to people what that is.
Okay, so Mahmoud Khalil is a terrorist, at the very least, terrorist adjacent.
And
I
this is a
consider
news
him,
story. Just for the record, this is a legitimate news story.
I would say, absolutely. Not only is who he is a news story, but the interview that he just did with the New York Times should be its own news story. So Mahmoud Khalil is this Algerian Palestinian guy, and the reason why you might have heard the name was he was the guy at Columbia University that was a graduate student or whatever, but basically a guy who had come into this country as a guest of the United States and decided to start causing trouble as an activist. I'm going to put activist in quotes, okay? In 2024, he became the negotiator and spokesperson for the pro-Palestinian protests on Columbia campus. If you recall this is when they were taking people hostage. It's when they were locking Jews into libraries for fear of violence. It's when they were marching every day, basically calling for the death of Jews, talking about Antifada, which is violent uprising. And we know what Antifada is because we had them, so we don't have to pretend we don't know. You know, all of the words, all of the specialty phrases that they use that somehow the potential mayor of New York also seems to have no problem using, all of that kind of stuff. Anyway, he's the guy that was part of the apartheid divest movement, which is a BDS thing. For those of you who don't know what BDS is, this is boycott, divest, and sanction. This is basically a racist organization that tries to destroy Israel by isolating it economically. And you know, it's one of those things that is recently was in the news because Trump basically said any state that approves of BDS sanctioning is not going to get money from the government for certain things, for FEMA aid, etc. In any case, this guy was the one on the college campuses that was the prominent negotiator. He was the spokesperson for this movement, and in a lot of ways a leader of this movement. He also made sure, because the people who are terrorists know very well how to get along within certain environments, whenever they would do something particularly violent, he wasn't present. He was leading the charge, but he wouldn't show up. So, like a coward might. And this allowed for when ICE decided it's time for this. He's a green card holder. He is not a permanent citizen of the United States. And there are factors that say you may not be able to stay in our country if you show up in our country as a green card holder, as a guest of this country, and then operate in a way of trying to destroy it, right? Or advocating for destroying it. So they tried to kick him out. They were unsuccessful. And there's a whole other thing we could go into about that we won't get into now. But he just gave an interview to Ezra Klein. Ezra Klein, a self-hating Jew at the New York Times, a guy who will sign the papers along with a bunch of anti-Semites about how Israel is, being destructive or whatever. And so you'll notice, if you do have a chance to read this interview, that Ezra Klein gives zero pushback. Okay. And in this interview, there's hours of this guy chatting. You can see the video. I have the videos, and a friend of mine went through and separated all of the moments where he like reveals himself through what he says. And part of what he says is October 7th was specifically designed because Israel and Saudi Arabia were going to create a peace agreement through the Abraham Accords, which is an admission that is shocking. And I know not everybody will understand why it's shocking. And Judah, I'd love to hear your take on this too, because
Are you
many
going to
people
let
say,
me
well,
speak?
like, yeah, I'm going to try. Many people will say, like, yeah, what's the big deal? Of course, Saudi Arabia, it's a fellow Arab state, and why would they not want it to happen? Why is that such a surprise?
Are you? Oh, you're asking me. I thought you were going to
I'm
talk about
throwing
the
it to
other.
you.
I thought you were going to talk about the other part of the interview.
Oh, there's other parts of the interview too, but this is part one. There's two
Well,
two specific things that we need to talk about in this interview: the Saudi Arabia thing and the desperate moment thing. But let me hear your thoughts.
listen, it's this. I'll sum it up like this. A girl, because she wears a short skirt, doesn't deserve to be raped. And that's my answer to you.
Well put.
And that's it. End of story. Nobody, because they are doing certain things or whatever it is that this is such a deeper issue, by the way. This whole, my whole theory about the European Union needing to prop up Iran and Palestine, or Palestine, hate using that word, Gaza, because it's really what keeps them in power. It's their only talking point they have right now that makes them relevant.
Correct.
So if Saudi Arabia and the Abraham Accords happen, there's no relevance. They need to be gone. They need to be excommunicado. And that's just the reality of the situation. If you want peace in a region, we discussed in the show, and you need security, you can't have barbarians at the gate.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what this was. Literally barbarians bursting through a gate, raping, killing, torturing, dismembering, murdering, and kidnapping people, innocent people, many of whom, by the way, in the sad, ironic twist, were the people that were part of Israel that most supported the Palestinians. These were people that would literally use their own cars as transportation to take some of these Palestinians from one medical center to another, helping them with aid, helping them with food, and these were the people they decided to destroy. There's one story. We won't go too far into the rabbit hole of it, but there's one story of a woman who was an artist and had a partnership with a Palestinian artist who would come to her house every day, would come through the gates, because there were people that were constantly streaming through between Gaza and Israel, and was working with her on a regular basis. And he was someone who also would help her with gardening and things like that around her house. And on that day, he didn't show up, and he gave her a call, and he asked her, "Hey, I can't make it today. I'm sick." But he started asking her all these questions. And at first, she was really worried about him and realized halfway through the call that he was just a sleeper agent, because he started asking, like, "By the way, are there any cops around, or the army? Have you seen any army nearby or anything like that? I'm just curious," really obvious, pointed questions. And she realized, oh my God, something's happening. He knows something. She told the authorities. Unfortunately, it didn't do much, but when they came through, it turned out all the people who were working with this community of benevolent, helpful, lovely people
It
that were
was one big
helping them,
sleeper cell. It was one big
all
sleeper
sleeper
cell.
cells, all of them were just
But
surveilling and
I
everything
want
else.
you to get to the main thing that
All
he
right.
said, the most disturbing thing that he said.
The main thing that he said was that he dismissed October 7th as a necessary thing, as something that it was necessary for Hamas to make sure that they still remained part of the equation. He talked about it as something that was easily dismissible as just a tactic, essentially, and made it seem like this is just needed context to use president of Harvard's language. It wasn't about hating Jews. It wasn't about anything else. It was just about making sure the Palestinians were the victims in this story of October 7th. And this was their desperate attempt to remain relevant, since the Abraham Accords were going around them. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Yes. And so
That
if
was
you think about
I mean,
anyone that justifies rape and murder and all the rest of the things that I said, literally cutting the arms off of children so they would bleed to death in front of their parents, and to him, no big deal, just a necessary thing. And Ezra Klein just nods his head. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Sounds right. Sounds right. That to me is the most shocking part of that interview.
but when you think about it, and we've had this disagreements with Mandan and with the dude, and he's not here, so I don't want to speak for what he has said, but this is what I always say to people with the Russia thing. We could argue about how we dealt with Russia afterwards and how we dealt with Ukraine with the finances, but they're the ones that went in with the tanks. They're the ones that shot the missiles first. It doesn't matter why. It doesn't matter why. There's nothing anybody that could say to me they were unhappy with this. They just do what they do. This is who they are. This is who Putin is. This is who Hamas is. We can't ignore the past. These are stone cold murderers, killers, and it's an amazing thing that we're witnessing again, this identification. And I was thinking about this today, and I don't want to get too much into the weeds about this, but I was watching Fogerty on Club Random with Bill Maher, and I love John Fogerty. And I love that he didn't get upset with Trump playing his music, and he wasn't extremely hostile towards Trump, which is a very interesting thing about John Fogerty. I think when you get screwed over in business by a lot of different people and you almost lose your catalog, and Irving Azov, the great Jew that he is, buys back your catalog for you, you might have a different view of things. And what's amazing is also, just people know, is John Fogerty set a precedent, a legal precedent, because he was sued by, and I'm blanking, Van Stone Dance, so that was the song, and it was Zance, I think his name was. He was sued by his own, not by his own label at that point. He was sued for plagiarizing himself as a musician.
That's right.
And, that's why he had that 14-year break. He just didn't want, but and when Center Field came out, he was sued and he won a landmark case. But the reason I thought about this was because they were talking about Woodstock, and I was thinking about the 60s and the anti-war movement against Vietnam, which was a good movement. It really truly was a noble thing. And then a lot of things got lost in the shuffle and the weeds,
Right.
but it was something. And this generation, we've had generations so far from real anything, real strife. This isn't even America's battle. It's not. I don't know why people keep on saying it is. It's a few dollars, but it's not America's battle. Yes, do we
And
try to?
and I want to just clarify too, when we say it's a few dollars, because some people are going to clip that one moment of you saying it's a few dollars and they're going to make that the conversation piece. Let's clarify. It is a few dollars that benefit America in a way that is incalculable. So right now, there is a conversation being had where Israel, I'm just going to detour for just a moment because it's an important parallel. Israel has said if the UK decides to recognize a Palestinian
Yeah.
state,
It's a big news story.
is it okay? I didn't even realize how big it was.
Yeah, because their
But
finance minister, the UK finance minister, went after Israel today. So that's why
yeah,
it's
and Israel responded by saying, "That's fine. You're going to do that. We're not going to. We're not going to attack you. We're not going to. There's nothing we can do except we can stop sharing information. We can stop being a surveillance arm of the UK, where the number of lives that have been saved by Israeli information, the number of terrorist attacks that have been stopped, the number of times Israel has saved the UK's ass over and over and over again, because there is no greater technological location than Israel. Israel is if you're looking at any topic, whether it's the iPhone or anything else in between, the R&D happens in Israel. The innovation happens in Israel. They literally just grew for the first time ever a human liver in a lab in a petri dish in Israel. It's going to change the way that we are able to do organ replacement. Everything that happens,
putting out fires with foam. I mean,
it's
or whatever it
unbelievable.
is. You know what I mean?
And so their threat is, that's fine. UK, you do what you're going to do, but recognize that you're losing us as a surveillance and a strategic ally. And UK is going to have to really make a decision. Do they want to have a symbolic victory for a group that has nothing to do with the UK, except for the fact that it's being overrun, of course, and pander to that terrorist base and pander to all the people in the world who are looking to cancel Jews or whatever the hell they're talking about? Or do they want a safe country? The decision that they make right now is going to tell you everything you need to know about their leadership. So when you say it's just a few dollars, or it's just a few euros, or it's just a few pounds, that is an exchange for technology, for defense, for surveillance, for information, for all of the stuff that Israel does that changes the world. This tiny sliver of land every day changes the world. You want to ally with somebody else? Go ally with the people who would have no money if they didn't find oil in their dirt.
Well, that was Trump's big thing with the tariffs, is who you're going to choose, big boys. Are you going to choose, you want to side with China? Is that who you want to be brokering deals with and is the intellectual property, or do you want to deal with us? It's your call. Little tariffs, or you side with China. And that's the brilliance and the genius of Donald J. Trump. But it's so much more. I was watching, and I don't know if we're going off topic, but it is really important because so much of the news people are taking and the images are fake, and the narratives created around it are fake. So that's why we do podcasts like this, and why we encourage people to watch other podcasts. So I was watching Trigonometry, and they had a guest on, and I'm not sure of his name, but the guy was brilliant, and he was talking about how bad the images of Gaza look. And he said, they're terrible. It's destroyed. You can't deny that it's destroyed.
You're probably talking
And
about Andrew Fox, right?
it might have been Andrew Fox. And he's like, you're 100% correct. I was there. He said, but how did it happen? It happened because of the way when it started, right? Israel went from house to house to house to house, and making sure that it was hand to hand combat in a sense, looking for people. And Hamas got wind of this, so Hamas said, got everybody out of Rafah, and they put IUDs in. And he was explaining these aren't the IUDs like in Afghanistan and Iraq. These are IUDs. He was saying there are 50,000 tunnels under people's homes in Rafah with IUDs in the tunnels. And so in the
underneath the children bedrooms,
right,
underneath
right,
pictures of Snow White. Yeah.
right. And then this is a bridge. So let's this, so he was detailing and explaining what Israel did and what Hamas saw them do. And so Hamas said, well, we'll just booby trap, we'll just wire. And because Israel doesn't indiscriminately bomb and indiscriminately shoot, they
Does
were going,
not. Correct. Very important for everyone to hear that.
it does not. And so they were going from house to house in Rafah and suffering heavy casualties. So first what they did, he was explaining, was they would send in a robot. Then they would into the tunnel under people's houses. Then they would send in a dog underneath. And then because they realized there were cameras inside the tunnel that Hamas was watching, so when the Israeli soldiers were coming, they would strike it. And they would set off the IUD. And then the IED. The IED. IED. That would be a totally different story.
Yes,
But
the explosive device. Yeah.
the explosive device. And then they wouldn't send in a unit. They would send in four at a time. And then they would just level it. That's why there's so much destruction there, is because Israel started, they're like, nobody's here, level the whole thing. Bomb it because we're not risking our...
It's actually really important. So first of all, just so you understand, you are talking about Andrew Fox, who's a brilliant guy and someone that I've actually had the opportunity to speak to. And he's a former British Army major he specializes in this counterterrorism, disinformation, and especially when it comes to Middle East policy. So he's a guy who really knows what he's talking about. He's been in Afghanistan, Bosnia, and Ireland, and everywhere else. So what he's talking about there is something that not enough people talk about. It's that Mend always is talking about, people forget there's a cause and then there's an effect. They only look at the effect and go, look at how sad, or look at how terrible, or look at whatever, but they don't go, well, why does it look that way? Gaza is destroyed. Okay, it is. It is leveled. There are no tall buildings. It looks like rubble. Absolutely.
Well, thank God for gay people.
Well, hey, they should all go march over there. I think it's a wonderful thing.
No, but I meant that they can't be tossed off the tall buildings. But go ahead.
Oh, that's very nice. That's very nice. I was talking about the Queers for Palestine, that, at least the buildings they're going to get tossed off of are a little shorter right now.
No comment. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Andrew Fox was talking about how there is a cause and an effect. Yes, it is leveled, but you have to take a step back and say, why is it leveled? Now, Andrew was also saying, it's a shame that Israel doesn't do more PR to explain this to the world, because they're operating in the middle of a war. And one thing that they're not doing enough of is explaining what's happening within the war. I would argue that
when
0.2% of the population has something to say against 2 billion Muslims who want to see them destroyed, plus all their anti-Semitic allies and everything else.
But go on, you already said it. You already said it. Ezra Klein from the New York Times did a puff piece on a terrorist. New York Times had fake pictures. You live in Barcelona where they get their news from Hamas. So there's nothing.
The AP does a news story interviewing Hezbollah's mothers. Yes, right. Of course, you're right.
So there's this thing that I said in the beginning about the PR. I was wrong. I could say I was wrong, and I was on the phone with a friend of mine before, and I said, just think about it like this. I really want people to put this in perspective. I always say this isn't about Israel, this anti-Semitism that's coming up. Israel was the impetus to help it, but think about it like this. This started on October 7th, the narrative. The narrative was already written that night of October 7th. Genocide was brought out immediately.
This is
Everything was
before Israel retaliated. Not one bomb was dropped, not one bullet was shot, and they were already marching on college campuses saying that Israel's committing a genocide. Before they did anything, they were already, there was already, I don't remember, seven or something like that, groups on Harvard campus that said, we blame Israel completely for the events of October 7th. Israel had not retaliated for even 1 second yet.
right. So that's really important to remember, because there's this great black guy that I don't know, I was scrolling through like funny people, and he was a black guy that he supports Israel. He's got a huge following. He's
Oh,
going
you're
to
talking
Israel.
about the heavy set chef
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
awesome.
That guy is just fantastic. And he was talking about this. He like really breaks it down like what about the hostage? Just he goes into everything in the most, and maybe that's the point we're missing sometimes, is that we have to get in, and that's why I'm bringing that up. We have to get into the most basic levels of people remembering, because at this point, people don't even remember October 7th, right?
Absolutely.
I think it was Andrew Fox that brought it up, or it might have been this black guy. They have amnesia of October 7th already at this point. And my friend brought up, even just ripping down the hostages off the things at that point already dehumanized Israel. And I thought that was such a brilliant point. And again, I don't think what we're witnessing, yes, obviously, but there's something really wrong going on. And I've been saying this, just so people know, from the world according to Ben Stein, I've been saying this for a long time, not just about Jews, but about Christians. I don't like people being pushed around. It's why I became a conservative. Conservatism is the reason why I didn't like watching people get browbeaten. And I felt like I had a voice. In the beginning it was writing, then it became podcasting or whatever it was. I always felt like I had a voice go on to beat back the browbeaters. And so nobody could ever say to me, oh, you just have been saying this since October 7th. I've been saying this well before October 7th.
And same for me, by the way. And that's the thing there. And by the way, I don't begrudge any Jew or anybody who believes in good versus evil that post October 7th woke up. Okay. A friend of mine, a guy I'm making a movie with right now, he was just featured in Forbes magazine, and really brilliant guy
There
making
you
his
go,
first
plugging
feature
that movie
film.
again.
Hey,
Plugging that
what
movie.
am I going to do? Always going to plug my stuff. But I'm producing the film with him, and just a brilliant filmmaker. And he, in the interview, he calls himself, I'm an October 7th Jew. I'm someone who was like, I was Jewish because I was Jewish. It was part of my identity. He's like a Woody Allen type. And he's a writer, director, actor, all of the stuff. And he said, though, he wasn't really thinking about anti-Semitism. Sheryl Sandberg, one of the most prominent Jews in America, said, I told my kids anti-Semitism is over. And you can see all these people who didn't realize, because they were either insulated from it or they believed that everybody who was around them who tolerated the Jews was suddenly, they'd forgotten that Jewish was a thing they even had to think about. And then post October 7th, when anti-Semitism, like you said, is surging now, hundreds of percentage more hate crimes and all of the stuff happening, suddenly they realized, oh my God, I lived in a world where all of this was just under the surface and didn't realize it. And some of us, not because we're better, just because we might have been paying more attention, knew it beforehand. Guys like you and me knew it beforehand and had been fighting the good
I
fight,
learned it
waiting
from
for
Ben.
this to come.
I mean, obviously, I had an amazing teacher in Ben Stein, and listen, a big distribution center for us for our podcast is through True Social, and I'm convinced that 90% of the people on Truth are great people, and they're scared to talk out loud about what we're talking about. There's some amazing Christians, amazing people on places like True Social, just good MAGA people. I hate even using that term anymore, because I feel like it's been bastardized by the grifters. Because Trump is an
Oh,
old
yeah.
school, Trump really is an old school conservative. I mean, I don't even know what to call him. He's a human.
Half the time he's an
And
old school liberal.
yeah, I know. It's exactly right. He's just common sense.
Yeah.
And when he's, make America great again was never, to me, is always just about making America great again. Everybody had interpreted it for, the left interpreted it that meant everybody over here wanted to start using the N word. Right.
Right.
Like that was like our making America great again. So I just want to help people understand what I don't think most people are bad. I mean, even polling shows that 71% still support Israel. and we don't know who the
Yeah.
29% is. Are they the new people that came into the party? I know it's not coming from the Latinos. I know that for damn sure. And I know it's not coming from the black community. I got to say from many people in the Republican black community.
Yeah.
Democrat black community,
Although
totally.
I will say the worrying thing is that while 71% is high, it used to be 82% not that long ago. And the numbers keep slipping. And I think a lot of it is because of the propaganda that's out there. A lot of it is because
The
it's
grifters.
become
It's the
the
grifter
grift. It's
movement.
exactly right. And I think specifically about, you know what just happened just a couple days ago? Governor Shapiro, okay, Josh Shapiro, who probably, if he had been selected to be Kamala's vice president, she probably would have won, actually. Except,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, but the price
can't
was
have a
too high,
Jew as
right?
your vice
The
president.
price was too high. She was pretty much saying, "Please put
Right.
your skin back on your penis and
Right, exactly.
make it like
Wow.
you never had a
Again, thank
circumcision."
you very much for the visual. But even Shapiro came out and said Israel is wrong. There is starvation in Gaza and all of this stuff. And he gave this speech that was like kind of just an anti-Bibi speech, a very leftist kind of speech that unfortunately also throws his entire country under the bus. And part of what he's doing is buying into not just the propaganda, not just the rumor, but we now know, and we knew all along, but now BILD, this German magazine, as we talked about yesterday, has revealed it through an actual expose with photographic evidence and metadata evidence that the pictures are manufactured, that every photo coming out of Gaza is manufactured. They're doing, here's the shot that you see, and then BILD revealed, here's the shot that you don't see from the other side, where it's not a food aid center that's on the cover of Time magazine. It's not just a starving old man. There's his fat daughter that's standing right beside him. It's not just a kid who's starving who happens to have cerebral palsy, but even if he didn't, there's his healthy looking brother standing right next to him off camera. All of these things we know. And so for Shapiro to say, I've seen it. How do you know, Shapiro? Have you been there? Did you go and surveil Gaza? Did you look around, or did you look at what everyone else is looking at? The propaganda that's in the newspapers, that's online, and that all the grifters are pushing on both sides of the aisle. That's the problem. So when you say 71%, I go, yeah, that's a
I
C.
know, but
We got a C, but it used to be a B.
it's still a very scary number, and I don't see it turning around. And just so people understand more, when we say the grifter movement, I'm referring to people like Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon is a worthless drunk, and if anybody doesn't want to listen to me anymore, obviously the person that gave us the reviews agreed. Steve Bannon is literally a piece of column of human sewage, drunk,
Yes.
and overhyped himself who he was in the movie industry. He's a straight up con man.
But everything he's
And
done has been that, by the way. When he says, I went to jail for Donald Trump, he went to jail for yourself, for your clout,
you're using
for you to be
my
able to. I think that I stole that from somebody very brilliant. He may have been named Judah. Continue.
yeah. But so he had the pizza parlor himself, Flynn, this morning, who said that, I mean, and you know, because he's, you know, what I love about Ben, and his father had said this to him about Herbert Stein. I don't want to paraphrase, just it wasn't the kindest thing about generals. And the old thing is the generals that start wars are never the ones that end wars. So
Mm-hmm.
this honor that we bestow generals is sometimes. I love that Republicans don't trust any generals, but Flynn, let's trust him. And so
Right.
he says Israeli soldiers were told to stand down at the exact hours on October 7th. Something broke down. It wasn't because of the mistakes, he said. It was an inside thing. This is a quote. Steve Bannon's reaction was basically a jaw to the floor. Now, here's the thing, you stupid jerk, is this go on is Hamas were wearing Israeli uniforms. They were stealing Israeli uniforms. There was total chaos going on the ground. The Israeli military that was sent in didn't know who they were shooting at, and there were a lot of orders saying we don't know what the hell is going on. And half the army was on holiday because it was on a Jewish holiday. So this is through a confluence of crazy events, and to come out and say this is, I mean, it's real. That again, we use that word, but this is blood libel.
Well,
This is
and
abs.
here's the interesting part. General Flynn, I would say, I'm going to say supposedly is a learned military man, because listening to this, he just seemed like yet another conspiracy theorist that Tucker should be giving a back massage to. But he drops this bombshell where he, yeah, full body massage,
You got to
where,
laugh at me. There you go.
you know, this inside job thing, it what's the proof? Because it seems like there's zero credible proof. It seems like most of the stuff that he was saying has been debunked. And that's not to discount the fact that there were security breakdowns, that there are strange things that we do have to figure out, and there will be an investigation. And when that investigation is concluded,
And there
we
have
will
been quite a
we will
few.
know more. There already have been some, and there are going to be more. Okay. I'm sure after the war, we'll do a super deep dive into what happened that day, because there were security breakdowns. There were issues that occurred. There were people that weren't in the right place at the right time. And there were people that were on vacation as well. Because one thing that we know is whenever Israel is asked, hey, you know what? We're coming up on Eid, or we're coming up on whatever holiday the Muslims have, no war during this holiday, or else the press is going to lambaste you. Except every time they launch a war, it's Yom Kippur, it's Simchat Torah, it's everything is on a Jewish
Well, it's
holiday
like Russia. Every
constantly.
time they say we're going to have a ceasefire, they attack. But go on.
Exactly, exactly. So we know that there were breakdowns, but this false flag bullshit is just a fringe, conspiracy theories. And at the end of the day, it's like all those 9/11 truthers. Oh, they wanted the planes to hit the buildings because Bush had vomited with a Japanese, But it's like, what do you? So you thought a distraction from some bad press, he knew the planes were going to hit the buildings and decided to let it happen anyway? Okay, look, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but it
Now,
feels that
you don't
way
know how
again.
long. I got to tell you something. After 9/11 happened was really when I started getting into and looking at the craziness of what was being said, and it was on both sides. I remember, my dad worked for Time Magazine. I remember Time Magazine had something like, essentially, it was on AOL, so it was Time AOL at that point. It was like, what did we do to cause this? And I remember looking at my dad in our old kitchen in Brooklyn and saying to him, you guys are on the wrong side of history on this one. He's like, yes, we are.
Ha ha
And,
ha.
so it's, I totally lost my train of thought of what you had just said to me, but I apologize
We're
for
talking
that.
about the 9/11 truthers, the
Oh
people
yeah, so that's when
who
I
came up
really
with these
started
conspiracy
looking.
theories.
I started looking, and that's when I found Michael Shermer. Michael Shermer's got a great podcast. But Michael Shermer is absolutely an exceptional person. He used to run the Skeptic Society. He still might does that. He still might do that, and he teaches out at Chapman University out here in California. Exceptional, exceptional guy. And he did this whole thing with popular science, debunking just every going down straight down the list. And I started looking at how long it takes to demolition a building, right? How
Right.
long it takes to set up a demolition. And on an average building goal, and it could take up to 6 months just to wire the building for demo. And I was thinking to myself, you know how many years it would have taken to set up all those buildings to be wired, to be demo? I mean, just everything, but it didn't matter. I mean, again, when you're dealing with this stuff,
Yeah,
there's
you're talking about truth, reality, facts, physics. These are things that are not part of the equation. In the end, if you look at October 7th, we know because they GoPro'd themselves doing it, that Hamas militants and a bunch of, let's call them not Hamas, just Gaza civilians in flip-flops, decided to break through the guard the gate, and just rape and murder and pillage and everything else. And tens of millions of people saw that footage. Okay, tens of millions of people saw survivor videos. They saw detailed investigations that confirmed it beyond a shadow of a doubt. So all of this false flag nonsense that General Flynn is spinning is just the same thing that all these other grifters are spinning. It's just a way to vilify Israel, to point fingers at the Jews, and to get popularity, likes, and to be relevant. And it's I don't even want to say I'm shocked, because Steve Bannon has been pushing a narrative just like all these other grifters, and this is just the newest guy who gets to sit next to him saying it.
I know. Well said. And a guy that Trump pardoned, and you have all these people. It really Trump must look around and go, "What the hell is going on?" And I'm curious to your point, and very quickly, do you think this administration has been brutal on the campuses defending Jews? Brutal. I mean, they have. Do you think there's a resentment? Do you think there's an underlying resentment from the Tuckers and the Marjorie Taylor Greenes of the world that, like, oh, now you're doing it? Well, now we're empowered to do it. But I was just
As
a thought.
opposed to when conservatives were being silenced.
But I'm just asking. Maybe you could cut that out if you want.
No, no, I think it's a valid question, but what is would be their time that they feel it should have happened when
Again, there doesn't
Republicans were
have
in
to.
power?
There doesn't really have to be. There doesn't really have to be. Again, when we're dealing with people in an institution, you're not going to have a lucid conversation, right? Once Nicholson had the lobotomy, you couldn't talk
Right.
to him anymore. Even in the movie, right? Remember when you're watching the movie and you know he has a lobotomy, you're like, Jack's going to talk. You know what I mean? He's going to
He
come through.
sits
He's
next to
going to
the
pull.
Indian and just starts
Yeah.
drooling.
Yeah, he's going to pull through this lobotomy. And
Yeah.
that's when I learned there's no pulling through a lobotomy. That might be a good title for the show. Uh,
It might be a good title for America sometimes. You know, I will say this. Guys like Tucker and idiots like Marjorie Taylor Greene actually benefited more than anybody from conservatives being silenced because they got to be, for a moment, the opposition. They got to be the ones who said, "We are fighting the good fight from behind the barriers over here," as if they were the French resistance. And they made millions of dollars. They became very, very famous. They got to have their face in everybody's living room on a regular basis by railing against everybody, both sides, by the way. Tucker would sometimes go against the conservatives and he would go against the liberals. And he would always talk about the victim class, except he would do it in a way that seemed empowered. So if he is mad at anybody, it's also performative because he would have no world that he existed in if it wasn't for the world being what it is today. So all of it is nonsense.
it's such a brilliant point. I mean, that might be the most brilliant point you've ever made. That what made all these people relevant was the conspiracy. And by the way, just for a little conspiracy, nobody ever. How come nobody has ever noticed that Marjorie Taylor Greene has 3 names?
Just like all the murderers in history.
You know where I got that from? Conspiracy theory. And you see,
Full
conspiracy
circle.
theory, full circle, yeah. And I just want to, my favorite story of the day is the Maduro bounty.
Amazing.
I want to see, did Marjorie Taylor Greene give the okay for that? I love that we put like a bounty of capture, capture, right? Of Maduro in Venezuela. And, I just love it. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they did this. And it's just fascinating. It's great. You gotta love Trump.
This is, by the way, for those of you who don't know, there is now a $50 million bounty on Maduro's head because Trump basically said, we don't just express concern about dictators, we hunt them down if they are trying to take over the world, if they are trying to damage the United States. Again, not a world police thing, how it affects the United States. This is one of those things that I talk about a lot, and I feel like it's important to continue hammering this into the ground as much as possible. Being America first doesn't mean isolating yourself and never talking about what's happening in the rest of the world because the rest of the world will affect you.
Especially Venezuela. I mean, it's especially a despot like Venezuela, where they're not just God, they're not just,
Susceptible?
yes, thank you. They're not just susceptible to 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 not just susceptible to they are being having their oil, and they are having all their things being with China, with Russia, with all these different countries. So yes, this is an existential threat that's not that far away from us. Okay, look at the
Yes.
map. Venezuela's not that far away from us. So this is very serious. Go on.
Present it's and if you think about it, there is a lot of issues coming into the United States as a result of it. It's not just a policy idea. It's not just a thing that can be a talking point in the news. You're talking about drug trafficking. You're talking about terrorists coming into this country. You're talking about, as a dictator, the threats that are actually present as a result of his existence matter to the U.S. And we're talking about the fentanyl pipeline. We're talking about national security. We're talking about any of these things that actually affect us as citizens. So we can, oh, you know what? That's over there. The thing I always talk about. If it's my house and my neighbor's house is on fire, and I'm like, not my house, not my problem. I'm not calling the fire department. But that fire can jump And the fact that I'm not paying attention or I'm not going to stop it because it's not my house means I don't understand, again, cause and effect. I don't understand what's coming down the line. That is so myopic. It's like not seeing the accident that's happening at the end of the road. So I just keep driving forward and hope I'm going to survive.
And lastly, I just want to discuss Republicans are finally learning how to fight back and play by the tricks of the Democrats. And it's amazing to watch Trump calling for the early census. If you have a problem with the census, this is the same people, no voter ID, but ID for everything else. No, it's like this, like these crazy things that they have go on. But the census, and Steve Miller brought it up. Like California we would have taken so many seats if there was an actual census in California.
That's right.
And we love Stephen Miller, great guy, does amazing work for this country. Could be making so much money in the outside sector, but he loves this country more than he loves money, and just is really sweetheart of a man. And he'd probably be mad at me for saying that, but he is a sweetheart of a guy and amazing
Agreed.
father, an amazing husband. And he did one of the nicest things for me. And it was just a really mensch nice thing. And, well, I don't know. It doesn't matter if I go into it or not, but he just did a really nice thing. And especially when he
It's
worked
the
with
behind
me.
the scenes stuff. People love to vilify guys like that because they're actually making a difference. But if you really know who they are, it's like Trump. If you know the stories behind the scenes, suddenly your narrative falls apart.
Yeah, and it was like, it was something, and he said, he was enjoying something and he had a next piece. He had a next interview and he's like, "No, I'm enjoying this. Tell them to hold off. I'm enjoying doing what I'm doing." And it was such a nice thing, and getting to see him smile, and starting the great organization with Gene Hamilton of America First Legal, who has just done such exceptional work. They're like the nicest people in the world. And, it's the census is important. If put it like this, if it wasn't important, we wouldn't have a census go on. So we miss the dude. The dude will be back tomorrow. Just want to
Always
thank
miss them.
everybody. Always miss him. And I want to thank everybody from the bottom of our hearts for all the ratings, the reviews, the help we get from people on Truth. It just we can't be said enough. And thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
There is no better metaphor than the sun rising here. As you can see, I'm starting to brighten, and that's because of all of you.
I love that. So you can find us everywhere at the Daily Cheat Sheet. Obviously, Apple, Spotify, Instagram, now Rumble, YouTube, Substack. You can find us all over. And here's one thing: I pray for the day that Israel is not in the news. I do not want to be talking about Israel in the news anymore. And I know we talk about this a lot, but that is the news right now. It's what everybody talks about. We just have a different take on it. But I don't want Israel to be in the news anymore. And I pray that there's a day that they're not. And there is the Abraham Accords are all about and working. And we don't have to talk about it anymore. We could talk about the census. And we could have a guest talking about a deep dive into the census. We'll have Stephen Miller on talking about the census.
Amen. Amen, my friend. That's a great
And
prayer.
I want to wish everybody a good morning, good afternoon. I want to wish everybody a good morning, afternoon, and night world, wherever you are. God bless you all.